but it's a small world here, right? Anyway, he was recruited as a spy by his brother-in-law, Julius Rosenberg. You know the name. You also know already who his sister was. Julius's wife, Ethel Rosenberg. So he's connected directly to two of the most infamous spies, really, of all time. Okay. So anyway, Ellen, I agree with you. You were talking earlier about green glass. One of the differences is that, Ted Hall, he's a brilliant kid. Brilliant kid. No denying that. Klaus Fuchs, same thing. He was stealing information that he himself was developing. Very highly intelligent. David Greenglass, nothing I've ever read, nothing I've ever heard him say, and we'll see a quote from him later, has led me to believe that he had a higher IQ than a vegetable. So he's not particularly intelligent, especially relative to the other guys that we've met. The other thing is he seems to be pretty docile, pretty malleable. And I think he was interested in the cause. Again, we'll come back to that in a little while. He provided information for the Soviets, but it wasn't particularly useful.
Did he get paid?
I don't know. I don't think, if any of these guys got paid, it was not significant. They weren't. We'll talk about motivations later a little bit, but yeah, if he was paid anything, I doubt it was very much. But anyway, the information that he stole was not particularly useful. It did help, corroborate some of the information that Fuchs and Hall had provided. Fuchs was the big spy. Fuchs was the one who provided the most information. Ted Hall was the first spy and provided some pretty good information. Greenglass provided some, so-so stuff. But those are our spies. Now, let's talk about their legacy. And again, we're going to find out what happened to all of these guys shortly. But anyway, we're going to jump ahead to 1949. Because again, this is serious business. I think it makes for a good story, and you're still here, so maybe you do too. But anyway, on August 29, 1949, the Soviet Union secretly tested its first atomic bomb. And as was mentioned earlier, it was basically a copy of Batman. They were able to build a copy of Batman because of the information that was given to them. Stalin did this test secretly. Why do you think he would do it secretly? You've probably seen all these big military parades in Red Square where there's all these soldiers and tanks and these giant missile things. Wouldn't you think after building an atomic bomb you'd have a big parade like that? I would have, but no. They decided not to because Stalin, he was pretty smart. He realized the Cold War would begin, the arms race would begin, I should say, as soon as the West found out that he had nuclear weapons. And keep in mind, 1945 to 1949, the United States had a nuclear weapons monopoly. What did it do with it? Nothing. We didn't really grow it that much. We certainly didn't use nuclear weapons in combat. We didn't decide we were going to take over the world. Harold Agnew, who was the third director of the laboratory, used to say, that's got to be pretty unique in history that a nation has had that kind of advantage militarily and has not used it. But anyway, the Soviet Union had an atomic bomb. I mentioned earlier, the Soviets had exceptionally talented scientists. I don't want to shortchange them. They had very bright people. Unfortunately for them, they had to work for Lavrenti. You think General Groves is kind of tough to deal with? I'll take General Groves. You can keep Lavrenti. Pretty tough place to be an atomic scientist. Still, it's still somewhat of a challenge. There's somewhat of a debate about how much the stolen information helped. I think that it was very useful myself. We don't have a lot of documentation from the Soviet archives, unfortunately, these days. The debate centers around the final two bullets that you see on the slide there. Was the information of critical importance, as Soviet intelligence officials have traditionally claimed? They wanted the stolen information to be important because, it was us, it was the intelligence guys. We're the ones who really made the atomic bomb. Or was it counterproductive because Soviet scientists were not offered an explanation of its problems? Where did this information come from?
How long did it take our spies to find out about the test?
Not long. Not long. Although the Soviet test, the question was, how long did it take us to figure out that the Soviets had conducted a nuclear test? Weeks. Just weeks. Because we had technologies capable of finding out what was going there, sampling air, things like that. We knew pretty quickly that they had conducted it. You know, I think that the information was useful, and there are a few things. We don't have archival records, but we do have memoirs from the scientists. Again, I can provide you one. Yuli Keraton, I believe, wrote a book chapter essentially about this stuff and gave Fuchs a tremendous amount of credit and said that he deserved more recognition than he had been given to that point. So anyway, I do think that it was very useful. Let's go on to our next slide. Why does it matter? You know, like I said before, this is, you know, it's Spy Week and that's fun and we watch the movies and everything else. But I also tried to make the case that this was serious business. And I do think that it matters. You know, number one up there, let me ask you this. If I said that I had spied for the Nazis, what would you think of me? Probably even less than you already do. All right? You know, that's pretty obviously bad. You know, helping Hitler get a nuclear weapon. That's pretty bad. If you think about it, the atomic spies helped history's most prolific mass murderer by body count, Joseph Stalin, acquire nuclear weapons. Now think about that for a minute. Does that matter? Do we really want to help Joseph Stalin, who killed, you know, it's well documented, Stalin killed 3 million of his own people. Well documented. Now usually when you murder people, you don't want to well document it. Most people estimate Stalin killed between 3 and 30 million of his own people. Most people, I think, would agree it was around 20 million. Think about that for a minute. And these guys thought it was a good idea to help him get nuclear weapons. I don't think that's a very good idea. That's pretty serious. And also remember, in addition to all the murder that happened in Stalin's country, Ellen mentioned some of the agricultural programs. You know, most of them didn't work at all. Millions of people died in famines in the Soviet Union during those years. You remember the checklist. He worked with Hitler to start the war in Europe. He protected Hitler's flank. He invaded all of the countries and regions or annexed them that you see listed there. I believe that Soviet acquisition of nuclear weapons prematurely accelerated the arms race. We'll never know. You know, if it had taken 3 or 4 more years, some people thought it'd take as many as 10. I don't think it was there, but you know, if it would have taken a few more years, Stalin died in 1953. Of course, Lavrenti helped run things right after that. Not for very long. And of course, Nikita Khrushchev, I would say, Nikita Khrushchev, who ultimately rose as the premier of the Soviet Union, the greatest gift he ever gave to humanity was having Lavrenti bury a shot. But still, what if Stalin had never had nuclear weapons? I don't know if the world would have been that much different. I know that it probably would not have been much worse. And we've talked about the American stockpile a while ago. We didn't have a big stockpile back in the early days. You know, we had, in 1947, 2 years after the war was over, we only